My name is Alex Jones. I'm 48 years old, and up until last Monday, I was the co-founder and CTO of Halcyon Analytics, a logistics optimization company based in Seattle. I built that company with my business partner and closest friend, Reed Mallory. For 16 years, we were inseparable through the early failures, investor rejections, 2 failed prototypes, and finally a breakthrough that brought in millions. We used to laugh that he was the face and I was the brain. He sold, I built. I handled the systems, the security, the compliance. I wrote every line of backend infrastructure we ran on. Reed pitched to the suits. I made the math work. I thought it was a good balance. What I didn't realize was that Reed had found a way to tilt the scales and then vanish with everything. The morning it happened, I was still in my kitchen, stirring my coffee, when my phone buzzed. The message was short. You'll never find me. No greeting, no context. I froze. At first, I assumed it was a joke. Then I tried to log in to our server dashboard. Access denied. I opened our internal Slack, deleted. Our company email system, completely scrubbed. I called Reed. No answer. I drove to the office. Our name was already off the door. Later that day, I confirmed it. Halcyon had been sold, quietly, legally, without me. The buyer was a shell company, registered in Hong Kong. The contract had my signature, sort of. It was one of those old power of attorney authorizations I'd given Reed 2 years ago when I had surgery and we thought he might need to sign for some filing. That document had been twisted and used to authorize a $92 million transaction. And I didn't see a single dollar. Then he texted me again. Forget it. Go live. Like he'd done me a favor. Like I should thank him for selling the company out from under me, cutting me out of everything we built. I stood there in the hallway of our old office, staring at that message, and I didn't feel shock. I felt still, quiet, almost peaceful, because I knew something Reed didn't. Years ago, when I designed Halcyon's architecture, I built an independent forensic server, a system completely disconnected from the cloud. Nobody remembered it existed. Not even Reed. It recorded every internal transaction, every signature, every login trail, and it was still running, still tracking. I didn't call Reed. I didn't tell my wife. I didn't answer the board members who tried to reach me once the rumors started. I just drove home, walked into my garage, and opened my old ThinkPad, the same one we'd started the company on. It took a few minutes to boot, but when it did, I saw what I needed to see. Backups, logs, proof. He thought I'd chase him. He thought I'd crumble. He thought I'd never recover. He was wrong. I didn't need to find him. I only needed to finish what I started. Halcyon started in the spare bedroom of my old rental house. Back then, it wasn't even a company, just an idea scratched out on a napkin during a late-night diner run. Reed and I had met in grad school. He was all charm and fast talk, the guy who could walk into any investor meeting and somehow leave with a check. I was the quiet one, the one who stayed up until 3 a.m. debugging a broken loop or rewriting our entire pricing model from scratch. Our skill sets were opposite, but they fit, and somewhere along the way, our partnership turned into something that felt unbreakable. Trust wasn't even a question, it was just there, like gravity. We called Halcyon our third child. Reed had 2 sons. I had a daughter, but Halcyon was the one we built with our hands. We worked side by side for years, growing from a 2-person operation into a multi-million-dollar platform with Fortune 500 clients. I still remember the first time we walked into a boardroom full of suits in New York and watched their eyes widen as we projected live optimization metrics onto the screen. Reed did the talking, but it was my math that turned heads. We celebrated that night in some overpriced restaurant I can't even remember. What I do remember is Reed raising a glass and saying, "We're untouchable." At the time, I believed him. We had our arguments. There were moments where I questioned his risk tolerance, especially when he started signing off on vendor contracts without my input. He liked shortcuts. I liked documentation, but I never thought he'd cut me out. Never thought he'd take everything and run. Even when he started traveling more, taking calls behind closed doors, keeping certain investor updates vague, I chalked it up to stress. Growth was messy. People drifted. I figured we'd realign eventually. I didn't see betrayal. I saw burnout. Then came the medical scare. I had a small heart arrhythmia that landed me in the hospital for a few days. Routine, manageable, but during that week, Reed had to run things solo. He told me investors were nervous about not having signing authority in case something happened. I didn't argue. I signed a limited power of attorney only for emergencies. He said he'd lock it in a drawer and forget about it. I did too. That was 2 years ago. Now I realize that was when the clock started ticking. I think the part that hurts most isn't the money. It's not even the company. It's knowing that the person I trusted with my life, someone who knew my daughter's birthday, who gave a toast at my wedding anniversary, was laying the foundation for this long before the final blow. That everything we built had quietly been converted into leverage. I never saw it coming, and maybe that's the part I'll never forgive myself for. Still, I wasn't broken. I knew Reed's style. Fast moves, flashy exits. But I also knew his weaknesses. He didn't read fine print. He didn't track compliance. He never bothered to learn the backend audit system I built after our Series B funding. The one designed to monitor insider threats, flag anomalies, and map user behavior across secure platforms. It was buried inside the dev environment, invisible to the regular team. He thought it was deactivated. But it wasn't. So while Reed was clinking glasses in some Dubai rooftop bar, I was in my garage, surrounded by server logs, database maps, and digital fingerprints. The empire might have looked like it was his now, but the foundation, that was still mine. And I knew exactly how to use it. The garage smelled like old dust and motor oil, but for the first time in days, I felt clear-headed. The ThinkPad sat on my workbench, humming quietly as I pulled up the archived network logs. My breath slowed, my mind locked in. There was no anger now, just focus. Reed had made his move, but what he didn't know was that Halcyon's architecture was built with long memory. Every authorization, every file movement, every attempted deletion, captured and stored in a secondary audit environment I'd nicknamed Ghost. Hidden behind what looked like a deprecated dev folder, Ghost had been logging backend activity for over 5 years. The idea for Ghost came after a minor breach in our 3rd year when a junior dev clicked a phishing link and compromised a client dashboard. We caught it early, but the stress of that week changed me. I realized the company needed an invisible observer, something separate from daily operations, but capable of showing the whole picture when things went wrong. Reed didn't want to spend money on it, said it was overkill. I built it anyway after hours, on my own time, using a standalone access key known only to me. That decision was now the reason I hadn't lost everything. I ran a series of commands. Within minutes, Ghost revealed a full trail of activity, forged signatures using cloned metadata, admin override tokens accessed from Reed's IP, deletion logs of internal investor updates, and something else, activity from a second device logged in from the Caymans 2 days before the sale. It wasn't just a shady transaction. It was premeditated, orchestrated. Reed had been moving pieces in the background for months, but every step he took had left footprints, and now I was following them. On the desktop sat a folder labeled Failover. Inside it were encrypted backups of our cap tables, IP ownership documents, and founder agreements, legal documents I'd saved offline after a bad experience during our first funding round. It also contained a series of emails between Reed and one of our VC advisors, discussing streamlining ownership and accelerating liquidity via creative structuring. I felt my jaw tighten. They were planning this, probably waiting until my role seemed obsolete, or my presence could be framed as a legacy founder problem. But they'd underestimated just how much of the company was built on my silent protocols. I took a break and stepped outside into the cold. The street was quiet, just a couple of kids riding bikes and a dog barking 2 blocks down. I looked at the sky and thought, this is what it feels like when everything falls away. But I wasn't falling. I was stripping everything down to the root. I made a decision right then. This wouldn't be about vengeance. It wouldn't be about destroying Reed or clawing back every dollar. It would be about something bigger, accountability. I'd spent my entire career creating systems that protected people from bad actors. Now I had to activate one for myself. I returned inside, opened my secure contact list, and found a name I hadn't called in years. Meera Patel. She was a former federal compliance investigator who'd worked with us during our early bid on a government contract. Smart, tough, meticulous, the kind of person who paid attention to detail, just like me. I drafted a short message, included 3 file attachments, and ended with one line, "I need your eyes on this," quietly. Then I sat back, closed the laptop, and waited. Meera called me the next morning. Her voice was calm but clipped, like someone trying to sound casual while already pulling strings in the background. She didn't waste time with small talk. "Alex, you said quiet, so I'll keep it that way. This is bigger than internal fraud." She paused, then asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Do you want to pursue this legally, or do you want to bury him?" I didn't answer right away. I just said, "I want it documented, airtight, and irreversible." She told me to send everything I had. No summaries, no interpretations, just raw files. The kind of data prosecutors and regulators could tear apart without worrying it had been dressed up. I spent the next 11 hours sorting, time-stamping, and exporting every relevant piece of metadata from the Ghost archive. File deletions, signature mismatches, admin escalation logs, device fingerprints. It was all there. I even had a VPN trail from Reed's laptop accessing shell company registration platforms from a hotel Wi-Fi connection in Cyprus. This wasn't some sloppy heist. It was deliberate, structured, and global. One detail stood out above the rest. The shell corporation Reed used to buy Halsan, Siglan Tech Limited, had a secondary registration linked to a Dubai financial trust. Meera traced it through a string of routing numbers to a UAE holding account that had processed 4 transfers just days before the sale. $18 million, $27 million, $9 million, and $38 million. All filtered through shadow vendors with barely legible business registrations. One of them was flagged in a previous Interpol probe. That's when Meera's tone changed. She called back late that night, her voice low. "This isn't just corporate theft. This crosses borders. If you're serious, I can open a channel with economic crimes at Interpol. You'd stay anonymous until necessary, but once it's in motion, you can't pull it back. They'll act fast and wide." I looked around my office. The walls were covered in whiteboards full of old projections and infrastructure diagrams. Ghost server logs scrolled silently across my second monitor. My whole life had been tied to building things that lasted. Systems, companies, relationships. I had never once pulled a plug until now. "Start the process," I told her. "And Meera, make sure they follow the money all the way to Reed's feet." 3 days passed in quiet precision. Meera fed documents to her contact. I prepared notarized statements confirming the chain of custody on each file. Every claim I made was backed by an unbroken data trail. I didn't embellish. I didn't speculate. I just laid out the truth, line by line. And then it happened. On Thursday afternoon, Reed's social media posts went silent. His vacation photos from Dubai vanished. His Instagram stories, usually filled with yacht decks and cocktails, disappeared. I didn't know exactly when Interpol had moved, but I got my answer that night. Meera texted a single line, "Dubai assets frozen. He knows." I stared at the message for a long time, not because I doubted it, but because I had imagined this moment for days and still couldn't decide what it meant. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel rage or satisfaction, just clarity. I closed my eyes and could almost picture him pacing in some luxury high-rise suite, staring at a laptop that wouldn't let him into his own accounts anymore. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. A number I didn't recognize lit up the screen. I let it ring. It rang again and again. Then finally, a text came through. "We should talk this over." I read it 3 times before putting the phone down. He didn't get it. Not yet. This wasn't a negotiation. I wasn't the old Alex, the one who would have tried to patch things quietly for the sake of keeping peace. That man had been locked out of his company, erased. I walked outside into the night air. The sky was moonless, and the neighborhood was still. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just let myself feel the silence. Strength doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just listens, then answers with precision. Reed kept calling. Different numbers, different time zones. Once, from a blocked line, I didn't answer any of them. Then came the string of texts, growing more frantic by the hour. This is getting out of hand. We need to fix this. Think about what you're doing. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because everything I needed to say had already been submitted to the right people, in the right language, through the right channels. And unlike Reed, I didn't bluff. At 8:10 the next day, he sent the one message that told me exactly how scared he was. Name your price. I stared at those 3 words. That's when I knew he was done. Not legally, not publicly, but internally. Reed only offered money when charm failed. I knew every phase of his behavior. First came arrogance, then manipulation, then fear. And now he was flailing. He didn't understand that this wasn't about revenge. This was about truth, about protecting what we built from being remembered as a cautionary tale of greed. That afternoon, Mira confirmed that Interpol had escalated the case. The UAE's Ministry of Justice froze Reed's company holdings under the International Cooperation Clause. His luxury apartment, his yacht, even the fleet of vehicles he'd registered under one of the shell companies, locked, and his primary bank account in Abu Dhabi, sealed, pending formal review. I received all this through encrypted messages, each one colder than the last. Mira wasn't sentimental. She was surgical. That's why I trusted her. By evening, I finally got a voicemail from Reed. He sounded exhausted, shaky. Alex, look, I made a mistake, okay? We can figure this out. You and me, forget the lawyers. We just need to talk, like we used to. I listened to the message twice. He was begging now, still trying to frame it like a misunderstanding between partners. He hadn't realized yet that I hadn't sent any lawyers. I hadn't filed a lawsuit. What I'd sent was documentation, verified, authenticated, and distributed across multiple agencies. What I'd built wasn't an argument. It was a blueprint for collapse. I sat at my desk, opened a blank Word document and wrote one sentence. It's already beyond me. Then I deleted it. He didn't need a response. He needed consequences, and they were already arriving. Around midnight, I uploaded one final file. An internal memo between Reed and a VC contact, discussing creative acquisition structures and using foreign buyers to mitigate co-founder equity dilution. The memo wasn't just unethical, it was damning. I sent it to Mira with the subject line, "Final nail." She replied within minutes, already building the case around it. The next day, I took a walk through our old office complex. A new startup had moved into the building. Their logo covered our old glass doors. I watched a few young engineers walk inside, laughing, holding coffee cups, backpacks slung over one shoulder. They reminded me of us, of who we were, before the pressure, before the shortcuts, before the greed crept in disguised as ambition. I didn't feel bitter, just older and quiet. Later that day, Mira sent another update. Interpol passed the files to DOJ, U.S. extradition in progress. He'll be grounded until it's processed. The irony wasn't lost on me. Reed, who always used to say, "You can't ground a man with vision," was now literally grounded. No flights, no exits, no movement. At 6:37 p.m., Reed sent one last message. "I'm sorry, truly. Please, just stop this before it gets worse." I didn't write back, not because I didn't care, but because there was nothing left to say. He'd chosen this path long before I ever responded. He just never imagined that the man who always stayed quiet, who never raised his voice or slammed a door, would be the one to bring everything down. That night, I slept for the first time in a week, not deeply, not peacefully, but without weight on my chest. The kind of sleep that comes not from winning, but from finishing what had to be done. The headlines started small industry blogs, niche startup newsletters, obscure investor forums. Then the story grew legs. Halcyon co-founder under scrutiny after secret $92 million sale. Interpol freezes Dubai assets. Linked to U.S. tech executive. I read each one silently from my porch, sipping coffee I'd brewed without thinking. My name wasn't mentioned. Not yet. But the pieces were clear. Anyone in our network could figure out what had happened and who had acted. I wasn't sure how I felt. Not triumphant. Not proud. Just resolve. I had done what needed to be done. I had honored the truth, even if it meant pulling the pin on something I helped build. Halcyon was always more than a business to me. It was a reflection of trust, of commitment. I'd poured years into that foundation. Reed took the profits. I kept the principles. Then the phone started ringing again. But this time, it wasn't Reed. It was former board members, investors, advisors who once ignored my emails, now calling with urgency in their voices. One by one, they asked the same thing. What do you want? I didn't want anything. Not really. The board offered me options. They said they could unwind the deal, rebuild the company under a new entity, even reinstate me as interim CEO. You'd have full control, one of them promised. Reed's done. We'll give you the wheel. I declined, not out of bitterness, out of clarity. Halcyon wasn't Halcyon anymore. Not without trust, not with that kind of stain soaked into its roots. I didn't want to lead a company that had to start with an apology. Instead, I turned their attention to something else. An open-source logistics startup I'd been mentoring quietly for the last 3 years, founded by a group of students I met during a guest lecture at UW. The team was scrappy, brilliant, and ethical to the bone. I told the board if they wanted to invest in integrity, that was their shot. A few of them actually listened, for once. That night, Mira called. He's officially under supervised restriction. He can't leave the country, can't access funds, and his lawyers are already trying to negotiate a soft landing. I asked her what that meant. She sighed. White-collar cleanup. They'll try to spin this as poor judgment. A civil dispute, but the evidence you gave them. It's going to be hard to paint over. I could hear papers rustling in the background. Her tone clinical as ever. They're calling in forensic auditors tomorrow. If it goes the way I think it will. He's looking at criminal charges in 2 countries. It didn't feel like justice. Not yet, but it was a start. The next morning, I received a handwritten note, slid through my mail slot. I hadn't seen that in years. No return address, just a folded envelope. Inside was a single sentence, written in Reed's handwriting. I never thought you'd actually do it. No apology, no explanation, just acknowledgement. That was more than I expected, and far less than he owed me. Later that day, a young woman named Emma called. She was a former intern at Halcyon, now running her own startup in San Francisco. She'd heard about what happened through someone at the investor group. I just wanted to say thank you, she said. I always thought the quiet ones got steamrolled in this business, but you proved otherwise. Her voice trembled slightly. You showed me it's possible to do things right and still win. I didn't know what to say. I just told her to keep her receipts and always build with integrity. The rest takes care of itself. By nightfall, the buzz had reached national outlets. They didn't have full details yet, but it was only a matter of time. I wasn't hiding anymore, but I wasn't putting myself out there either. This wasn't my moment. It was simply the next chapter of a story I never wanted to write. The reckoning wasn't over, but the foundation had cracked, and this time, it wouldn't be covered up. Within 48 hours, the fallout turned official. The Department of Justice had launched a joint investigation with Interpol and UAE authorities, confirming what Mira and I already knew. Reed hadn't just broken trust. He had committed wire fraud, securities fraud, and international money laundering. The forensic audit report was more damning than even I expected. He hadn't acted alone. 3 foreign shell companies, 2 former consultants, and 1 complicit financial advisor had helped facilitate the theft. What started as a betrayal between 2 founders had now triggered a global criminal case. Halcyon's name was everywhere, and not for the reasons I'd hoped. On a quiet Tuesday morning, I received a call from Victor Lang, a senior member of Halcyon's former board. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Alex, he said. I won't waste your time. The company's in crisis. We're restructuring. We need someone the stakeholders trust. I waited. He continued. We're creating a new executive role, Chief Integrity Officer. Independent of the board. Complete oversight. We want you to take it. I didn't answer right away. I walked outside, phone pressed to my ear, the wind rolling through the trees as I stood in the driveway. I didn't feel flattered. I felt cautious. Why now? I finally asked. Victor didn't dodge it because everyone realizes who the company actually depended on, and we don't want to make the same mistake twice. That night, I sat down with my wife, Nora. I laid out everything, what they offered, what it would mean, the pressure, the politics. She listened without interrupting, just like she always had. When I was done, she looked at me and said, "Do you want to build something again, or do you just want to finish what you started?" It was a good question, one I couldn't answer yet, but deep down, I already knew I wasn't interested in power. I was interested in clarity. So I gave them conditions. If I came back, I wouldn't be window dressing. I wanted full access to compliance architecture. I wanted direct reporting to outside legal counsel. I wanted internal audit authority across departments. I sent the terms by email and told them I'd wait exactly 48 hours. No boardroom dances. No soft shoe politics. Just a decision. The next morning, I received 3 calls and a formal letter from the interim CEO. They accepted every condition. Still, I didn't reply right away. I went to visit Mira first. We met at a small coffee shop in Capitol Hill, the kind of place where nobody asked questions. She handed me a sealed manila folder. Interpol's closing in. They've confirmed cooperation from 2 of the shell entities. Your case lit a fire under them. I nodded. And Reed? I asked. Mira didn't blink. He's trying to cut a deal, but it won't be clean. His extradition is inevitable. As we parted ways, she gripped my hand and said something that stuck with me. Quiet men like you scare them the most, because when you move, it's already too late for them to run. That night, I sat in the study, staring out at the skyline. Halcyon's name was tarnished, but not dead. The tech still had value. The team, what remained of it, was good, young. Some had been loyal even through the chaos. One in particular, Riley Vega. Our former lead engineer had stepped up to hold the line. I'd mentored Riley years ago. Now, I asked him if he'd stay and run the operations team. He said yes, without hesitation. I didn't go back to rebuild the company out of pride. I went back to protect the people, still standing in its shadow. People who deserved better than a scandal. The final call from Victor came late Friday afternoon. The role is yours. The board voted unanimously. I said 2 words. Send the paperwork. They did, and just like that, the man they tried to erase was now the one responsible for watching every move they made. 6 months later, I sat alone in my new office, corner unit, 10th floor, overlooking the Seattle skyline. The nameplate on the door read, Chief Integrity Officer. The irony didn't escape me. The same company that once quietly pushed me out was now rebuilt under protocols I had written, safeguarded by systems I had designed, and reporting directly to me. But I wasn't here for the title. I was here to make sure this place could never be manipulated like that again. Not by anyone, not even me. The view from up here was clear. On some mornings, I could see ferries drifting across the bay. On others, just fog and quiet. I liked both. There was something about the silence that helped me think. It reminded me that real strength isn't loud. It doesn't bang the table or storm into meetings. It listens. It watches. It waits for the exact moment to move. And when it does, it doesn't miss. The Halcyon team had changed. Some left in the aftermath. Others stayed, bruised but resilient. I promoted Riley Vega to head of engineering, gave her autonomy, trust, and room to lead. She reminded me of myself, patient, disciplined, focused on building things that lasted. I also implemented the single policy I wished we'd had from the beginning. Mandatory whistleblower pathways tied directly to outside counsel, no internal filters, no delays. You saw something, you spoke, and it got heard. Reed's story took a different turn. He was extradited quietly. No headlines, no spectacle. That's how it goes when money's involved, especially when there's enough of it to bury the noise. But even buried, the consequences still lived. He pled out on 2 charges: fraud and unlawful international transfer of assets. He lost the rest of his holdings, his accounts, his access, and whatever reputation he had left. I never heard his voice again, never saw another message. But one day, a letter arrived. No return address, just a name scribbled at the bottom in worn ink. Reed. Inside, only one sentence: I thought you'd destroy me. Thank you for being better than I was. I folded it once and placed it in a drawer. I didn't need anything from him. Not guilt, not gratitude, just distance. That weekend, I visited the lake outside the city, the same one I used to take my daughter to when she was young. She's in grad school now, working on urban infrastructure design. I like to think some of what I taught her about systems, the way every part matters, found its way into her blueprints. I stood at the edge of the dock, watching the water ripple under the wind, and pulled an old Halcyon keycard from my coat pocket, the one they never collected after they fired me. I held it for a moment, and let it fall into the lake. It hit the surface with barely a splash, no ceremony, no dramatics, just gone. My phone buzzed, a message from Riley. Board just approved your new compliance protocol, a unanimous vote. I smiled faintly. No arguments, no corrections, just trust. As I turned to leave, I noticed a young man sitting alone at the other end of the dock with a laptop, head down, deep in thought. I saw something familiar in the way he stared at the screen, like he was building something no one believed in yet. I didn't say a word. I just walked past him and nodded once. He looked up, nodded back. That was enough. The sun was setting as I reached my car, the city skyline behind me. Calm ahead, no media chase, no applause, just the knowledge that I had stood still while everything tried to knock me over, and somehow I was still here. Strength doesn't always scream, sometimes it just leaves quietly, with its work done, and a bridge repaired.